This is part 3 of my pitch accent video series. If you haven't watched these videos yet, please check out at least the introduction first. The link in the description. Pitch accent and i-adjectives. The pronunciation of i-adjectives has been changing. The non-traditional way of pronouncing i-adjectives has been getting more and more common. So both traditional and the new ways of pronunciation coexist in the Tokyo dialect, or standard Japanese. I'll talk more about this later, but before that, here's a little recap of Japanese pitch accent and verb conjugation. As I mentioned in Introduction to Japanese pitch accent patterns are categorized into two groups, downstep type and the flat type. In the downstep type group, there are three different patterns. But for verbs, you don't have to worry about these patterns because in the downstep type verbs, the accent falls on the second to the last mora. For example, 来る、食べる、集まる. All of these verbs are downstep type verbs, so the accent falls on the second to the last mora. In the flat type verbs, there's no accent. In the downstep type verbs, the accent falls on the second to the last mora. Unlike nouns or na-adjectives, what you have to identify is if a verb is a downstep type or a flat type. The same thing goes for i-adjectives. For i-adjectives, you don't have to worry about these patterns because in the downstep type i-adjectives, the accent falls on the second to the last mora. For example, いい、白い、楽しい. All of these adjectives are downstep type, so the accent falls on the second to the last mora. As I said, the pronunciation of i-adjectives has been changing. More and more people now pronounce traditionally flat type adjectives as downstep type adjectives. For example, this one. This one is traditionally pronounced as the flat type, like 赤い. But pronouncing it as the downstep type has been getting more and more common, like 赤い. Not only that, the pronunciation of conjugated forms in the downstep type adjectives has also been changing. For example, 白い turns into 白くて in its te form. In the traditional way, the accent falls on し, 白くて. But in a new way, the accent falls on ろ, 白くて. Traditional way or new way? Which one should you learn? I'll leave it to you because there are pros and cons in both ways, so all I can do is giving you options. Some people might feel it's inconvenient to learn the new way because this change in pronunciation hasn't been reflected on some pitch accent dictionaries, like NHK's Accent Dictionary. Others might feel learning the new way is much easier because the simpler the better, right? You don't even need to worry about if an i-adjective is a downstep type or a flat type, because all of them are downstep type in the new way. The traditional way is more of an established one. Since the pronunciation has been changing, studies on the new way are still ongoing, as far as I know. So we cannot say precisely to what extent the pronunciation has changed. Like, is the change really applicable to 2 mora words? What about 3? What about more than 4? So you choose. I personally pronounce i-adjectives in the new way though. It's awkward for me to pronounce them in the traditional way, especially the dictionary form. With that said, in this video, I'm gonna cover the traditional way. I'll cover the new way in another video. So if you choose to learn the new way, you can stop watching this video now. As I said, all you have to do is to identify if an i-adjective is a downstep type or a flat type, because we know In the downstep type adjectives, the accent falls on the second to the last mora in the dictionary form. And once you identify that, you can tell where the accent falls for some of the conjugated forms. So let's learn about which mora is accented when an I adjective turns into different forms for the downstep type and the flat type, respectively. First, let's take a look at the polite form. This is the only form in which the accented mora is the same between the downstep type and the flat type among the different forms that I'm gonna cover in this video. In both types, the accent falls on the mora before I. For example, the downstep type word 白い turns into 白いです. The flat type word 赤い turns into 赤いです. As I said, the accent falls on the mora before I. 白いです. 赤いです. Next, let's take a look at the form in which an I adjective modifies a noun. This form takes the same pitch accent pattern as the dictionary form. In the downstep type adjectives, the accent falls on the second to the last mora. For example, a downstep type adjective, 白い. The accent falls on the second to the last mora. And when it modifies a noun, 時計, it becomes 白い時計. A flat type adjective, 赤い. This word has no accent, and when it modifies 時計, it becomes 赤い時計. 白い時計, 赤い時計. Next, let's take a look at the adverbial form. In this form, the accented mora is also different between the downstep type and the flat type. In the downstep type adjectives, the accent falls on the third to the last mora. For example, 白い turns into 白く, and the accent falls on し. 白く. In the flat type, there's no accent. For example, 赤い turns into 赤く. As I said, there's no accent. 赤く. Next, let's take a look at the て form. In the て form, the accented mora is also different between the downstep type and the flat type. In the downstep type adjectives, the accent falls on the fourth to the last mora. For example, 白い turns into 白くて, and the accent falls on し. 白くて. In the flat type, the accent falls on the third to the last mora. For example, 赤い turns into 赤くて, so the accent falls on か. 赤くて. Lastly, let's take a look at the past tense affirmative form. In this form, the accented mora is also different between the downstep type and the flat type. In the downstep type adjectives, the accent falls on the fifth to the last mora. For example, 白い turns into 白かった, and the accent falls on し. 白かった. In the flat type, the accent falls on the fourth to the last mora. For example, 赤い turns into 赤かった, so the accent falls on か. 赤かった. Here's the summary.